Okay, the recording has started. I now call to order the Board of Trustees meeting for March 2nd, 2021. The meeting has been held according to the Illinois Open Meetings Act as amended, subject to the governor's state of emergency for the pandemic. So we are meeting remotely. May I please have a roll call, please?
Trustee Chamberlain.
Here.
Trustee Clayton.
Here.
Trustee Goldstein. Trustee Haber.
Mr. Haber's not here.
Trustee Hollander.
Here.
Trustee Jamerson.
Here.
President Norris.
Here. Thank you. We have a quorum. First item of business is approval of minutes. The clerk got some proposed changes a bit late, but they are rather minor. I'll let her explain them, and then that's what I would ask if we could vote on. Madam
Under
Clerk.
the
And there's
Under
Mr.
the village treasurer report, there was a couple of minor spelling corrections, changed. Trustee Clayton reported, changed report to summary, and then it deleted a period and added a comma behind in the middle of the number 68,000. So that is very minor. And then Trustee Hollander would like the revision to reflect, instead of Trustee Hollander noted the village has made some attempts to help people through COVID, the wording to be Trustee Hollander noted the village has made some limited adjustments to fees and ordinances to help businesses through COVID. They're both corrections that I feel comfortable with.
Okay, noting those changes, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any other additions or corrections? I did. I'll note again, the chief just pointed out that Trustee Haber is here, which I should note again for the record. So may I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Chamberlain,
Aye.
Trustee Clayton,
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein, Trustee Haber,
Aye.
Trustee Hollander,
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson.
Abstain.
All right, thank you. Moving on, Russ was having trouble logging in. I just sent him another invitation. So let me move to the, whoops. There he is. Let's go to the Plan Commission while Russ is logging on.
Okay. And very quickly, I can report that the Plan Commission will be meeting on March the 4th, where we will have, as part of our duties, the public hearing to consider a zoning text amendment to amend the zoning ordinance to revise and add certain defined terms, including dwelling, family relationship, community residence, and transitional residence. That is it.
Any questions for the Plan Commission? All right then, Russ, glad to see we got you the right information now. So I'd like the Director of Community Services report.
Okay, not much this week. Trustee Jamerson and I sat down this morning and went over the fee schedule that I've been working on off and on for the last couple of months. I think we've got everything in order at this point in time. I sent a couple of pages to our engineer, Mr. Glenn. He's been talking about redoing the sewer and water connection fees, or looking at them, and I want him to look at the water meters and anything else that pertains to him. So hopefully in the next meeting or the meeting after that, we can come to the board and have all the fees in line and updated, and have to do this only once, and it should last for a couple of years. So that's the biggie. Been handing out a couple of red tags for people running some illegal businesses. Other than that, that's about it for right now.
All right, any questions for Russ?
Russ, can you send me that also? The fee schedule?
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, no problem.
What kind of illegal businesses are we talking about?
Well, one guy we're looking into now, the police had a disturbance over there last week. They thought he was running a automobile repair shop. I red tagged him, went over there. He says he's not, but he has a bunch of junk cars there. It's just a mess. So I told him he's got to get all the stuff cleaned up, and the cars have to be licensed and working operation. He just can't. He's just got a bunch. He's just got a mess there. Another guy is the chief. One of the guys had to go to a house, and I think he's running an illegal painting business. So him, I did not get a chance to. There was nobody home this afternoon when I went over there. I just left the red tag hanging on the door. So when I go in Friday, hopefully he'll either call me back or I'll be able to go over there and see what's going on.
And as far as the car dealer or the car repair shop, if it isn't a car repair shop, then he's violating our ordinance as to the number of automobiles, non-operating automobiles, et cetera. So
Right. He's
one
got,
way or the other, we're going to be cleaning up the problem.
yes, most definitely. He's got at least 3 cars with no engines in them. I think 5 of them have the license plates on them. So I told him there was, when I was there Friday, a bunch of them were snowed in with all the snow, but with the temperatures coming up and the snow melting, I'll stay on them, and hopefully we'll get a lot of that stuff moved out of here in the next week or 2.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, then, moving on, treasurer's report.
The latest version of the fund management plan was included in the final packet, I believe. And I'd like to call your attention to the water fund and sewer fund, which were the topics of conversation last meeting. Kyle, Pat, and I have met a number of times on this, and there's been some substantial changes since the last meeting. We discovered and resolved some double counting. We had projects both in the expense line and then itemized separately. I had made a mistake, and then we reviewed all the projects all the way through 2029. And so having said that, if you look at the sewer fund going forward, you can see that with our $1 million target balance, we're okay all the way through 2024 when we're just about $50,000 under that target. I should point out that in these cases, these forecasts, all the revenues are held flat and the expenses are inflated at 2% a year. So this gives us a fairly conservative view of the future of these funds. The water fund, on the other hand, goes from about 2.5 million in 2020 down to 1.5 million. So that's by 2024, that's 500,000 below our $2 million target. And we start declining next year. So we'll have to review that and decide whether we want to propose a rate increase, we want to borrow the money for some of the projects, or do a transfer from the general fund and so on. But all in all, the picture's a lot brighter than it was when we don't double count the projects in the forecast. That's about it.
Yes, Rick.
Didn't we have a loan from the water fund to the village, or from the village to the water fund at some point in time?
Okay, there is, and I'd have to check the balance, but it's approximately, I think, $600,000 to $700,000 that was loaned to the water fund about 20 years ago. We had loaned water in the past. Those loans had all been forgiven because that was part of getting the water as many places as we could. This one has never been forgiven. The board can forgive it, can pay it back, or, well, you should do one or the other because it shouldn't be carried on the books. But yes, that is there.
So the current balance that's in that fund includes that loan amount, right? Because it's sitting in there. So actually, if we pull that out, we're even in worse shape than this shows. Okay.
Right.
So we have to decide what we want to do with that, whether we want to forgive it partially, or have the village pay it back.
What was the date of that loan approximately?
Oh, I would have to go back.
The 20-year
I
approximate?
don't
Or just a
think it
couple
was,
years?
I don't think it was 20 years, but I'm going to say about 10 or 12.
I think
guessing.
it was at least 12, but it was the last major water project.
Well, it's more than 10 because I've been on the board for 10
Right.
years and I wasn't on the board when that was loaned to the water fund.
Cheryl, you've been 12. Do you remember voting on that to loan water money?
Honestly, no.
Okay, so it's probably over 12.
Yeah,
Thank you.
actually, I think it was just before me.
And again, we haven't had a major water project like that. I think the last 12 years have all been self-sustaining. And it was approximately that point that we started buying water from Northbrook. In fact, that was, I think, 13 years ago now. So, and that's when we started having enough of a balance in between to start generating funds. Up until that point, there was not much in the water fund. So, yes, Henry?
It seems that before we would take another action of raising the water rates, which we did, I guess, a year or two ago, or pass through them, that we ought to resolve this $600,000 loan one way or the other. I don't think it's a good idea to just keep this going year after year for over a decade, whatever we decide. But I will put my 2 cents in and say that the water fund is generally for people who get water, not as being a source from the general fund. And I think this deserves a discussion as an agenda item by itself at some time in the very near future.
I would agree. I think it needs to be cleared up. Certainly half of the village isn't on water. And there's a real argument to be said that that half shouldn't be. It was one thing when we were all benefiting from extra water service, et cetera. But now that we have enough money, it's a different question.
But it's also the
There is
fact
the
that we
precedent of
raised,
forgiving it. So
it's also the fact that we raised rates in the water fund within the last year or two while still having this on the books.
yes. Which, well, if we hadn't had it on the books, we'd have had to raise it anyway. That much more, but
But I might have recommended a higher raise if it wasn't forgiven. I don't know what we would have done, but I think it needs to be resolved.
appropriate accounting and treatment of it should either be forgiven or paid back. Counsel, were you going to? I heard somebody somewhere start to say something, so.
I don't think it was me.
Oh, okay. Well, does anybody have anything they want to say? I don't want to be cutting you off on that. Okay. Moving to consultants' reports, unless there are any other questions. Okay. Walt Hamilton,
My item is on the agenda.
all right, village attorney,
I've been told that the Federal Life property is under contract now by the attorney who's representing the developer. They're supposed to be in touch with us soon and start discussing their plans, but I haven't heard anything yet as of now. I haven't heard anything further from the possible developers of the 37-acre parcel, although the last conversation was they were getting closer to being under contract. And an attorney, also a different attorney, called me and said that he might be engaged to represent the developer, but so far I don't have anything concrete to report. And we have been looking at, talking with some of the other owners nearby who might be interested in annexing. That's really been Trustee Hollander and others. And so I don't really have anything to report on that other than to say that, we're open for business. There's just nothing happening yet.
any questions for the village attorney? All right, then village ecologist is not here this evening. Police report.
Police activity is in the packets. I've been trying to keep residents up to date on COVID vaccine information through email blasts. I did get something today about what they're doing at the United Center. I haven't read it yet, but I'll read it and put something out on that. But I believe that'll be an opportunity for our seniors and for our people with underlying conditions to have another avenue that they can go to. My officers are 1B, and I was able to find places where they could get vaccinated And everybody who wanted to get vaccinated on the police department has had their second dose already. And that's almost all of us. Only 2 people opted not to for now. And that's all I have.
Okay. I would add to that, just that I hope everybody will be active on their own, because it appears that a great number of people have found other places to get vaccinated, I should say, at various private entities. For example, my wife and I had an appointment at the Cancer Treatment Center in Zion, but we were fortunate enough while in Florida to fit into that category, and we've got our first shots down there already. But encourage you not to sit back and wait for the county necessarily, because there are just so many other places now. Not that you can necessarily find it. I know many people have tried, and it's the luck of the draw if you happen to click your computer on at the right moment, but I would encourage everybody to keep looking. And it's, they're saying that you have about a 65 or 75% immunity after your first shot. So that alone makes it worth trying to chase down.
And Lake County is advising not to wait for them. They're saying if you can find it elsewhere, you should go elsewhere.
And the United Center, from what I heard, and Bruce, I'm sure you'll research this more, but it's like 100,000 doses, which isn't that many when you consider it, as that's what they're going to start at. But they're going to open the registration for appointments like at 8 o'clock on some morning. I don't know which morning, but it's going to be crazy. So, but it's open to everybody, not just Chicago residents. It's anyone in the state that can get in. So, but that's in 1B right now.
And look, don't sell yourself short if you have the time to travel. I know somebody that's gone to Pekin to get a shot. So
I went to.
I'll put out what I have on the United Center tomorrow morning.
So anyway, we'll all be glad when everybody's got their shots, and hopefully we can put more of this behind us. Okay, then, any other questions for the chief? Moving on then, the appropriation ordinance. Bruce, I'll turn that back over to you, as in Bruce Huvard.
Well, we're published to have our hearing on the appropriation ordinance at the next meeting in March. We have to have the hearing before we can adopt the ordinance, so we'll be looking for waive first reading and second reading and adoption at the March meeting. Most of the categories in the appropriation ordinance are the underlying budget numbers that Mike Clayton helped provide to us, and increased by 15%. The only real exceptions to that are, I think the special service areas are a little bit more customized based on what I anticipated for their participation in upcoming road projects or what their bond ordinances say. And also, there's the magical category of transfers out. If you look in the general fund and you go down past most of the other departments, you get to the last section on transfers out. This is the area where we're most creative, because by authorizing large transfers out to various other uses, we give ourselves the ability later on to spend that money, not of course that we have to. So when we anticipate something like, for example, acquiring property next to Federal Life on either side, in case we thought we might have a chance at a larger scale type of development, I've included a transfer out or proposed one of 3-point-something million to fund number 2, which is the fund that would be able to spend that money. These aren't written in stone, and I've asked some of the people on the finance committee to look at it and come back with recommendations to you. But I just wanted to have this in front of you so you could see some of the ideas that we're playing around with that.
And this is not authorizing any specific spending. This is only authorizing the money to be available to be spent if otherwise approved by the board for a specific reason. Rick?
So this is for 21, right? 2021?
This year, yes.
I would just make a comment, and I could be off base here, but a couple of things in the general fund under administration for salary for staff. I noticed it's, the budgeted amount's 138,000 and the appropriated amount is 159,000. And we all know that we don't have to spend all that we appropriate. But if the incoming administration wants to hire a village manager or a village administrator, I think there should be room in that appropriation amount to handle that. So I think that number needs to be higher, and probably the same thing is true in the building department. At least the appropriated amount should be bigger than what we based our budget on from last year. My opinion,
I think that is a reasonable suggestion. I won't be the one that's being affected by it, obviously, but I do know there is some thought on it one way or the other. Mr. Clayton?
I noticed there was nothing appropriated for Swalco or the chamber, and I know that wasn't on the budget spreadsheet, so I was just curious as to what do we have to pay to be part of those organizations, and why isn't there nothing appropriated?
Well, Swalco would be about 3,000, assuming there's no resurgence in the recycling.
You know, any of these things, there's nothing, we don't have to, the fact that there's not a budget item doesn't mean we're precluded from including as an appropriation. So I'd encourage everybody, do you see any gaps or holes that you have recommendations on? And who should be the central clearing for this, Mike? Should they come to me, to you?
Bruce, you've been doing it. Let's make it Bruce Huvard, just for simplicity.
All right. Just any suggestions you have, because, you know, this is a working collaborative document.
And I appreciate that most of you didn't see it until just this afternoon, so.
I just have one more question. I mean, in the past, I think we appropriated a lot more than we actually had budgeted because we didn't really have budgets.
Right.
So I'm wondering if we shouldn't be a little bit more relaxed in the appropriation amounts, just to give ourselves a cushion. I mean,
see, Bruce, he's getting rid of me, so he's willing to put a little more money out there.
You know, I built in something for the contingency. I don't remember what we had in there, but
200,000.
so maybe that's not enough. Okay.
So,
Okay.
and I would encourage the probable incoming mayor to review this as well and give me a call and give her an opportunity to put her 2 cents worth in, so to speak. Because this is her appropriation more than mine. She'll have to live with it. Henry?
Yeah, question on how this works legally. Does this, if we approve this appropriations, does it preclude us from spending more overall or in any individual category?
Well, within a fund, you have a lot of latitude to shift between items within a fund, like within the general fund. The transfers out that gives us the flexibility to spend more than we've appropriated in the, say, what, the water fund or the TIF fund, because we've arranged for money to be transferred from the general fund to those funds if we needed it. So we're pretty much covered with the transfers out if we've anticipated the needs of those other funds. And with respect to the general fund, we're pretty covered if we have an adequate contingency and we've appropriated enough in that fund.
Let me give you a hypothetical, and I'm not suggesting we're going to do this. There is no fund if we wanted to spend $100,000 to build a playground next to the city hall. I'm not suggesting we do this, but what I'm asking is, if we decided to do it, would we be precluded from doing it based on the appropriations fund?
Well, not for 100,000 because we have already 300,000 in the contingency, so we could move that. That's in the general fund. So, and that's what Rick was saying. Don't be so tight in the general fund. Give yourself enough leeway. Some years we've been very liberal, and some people were quite astonished by how much we were appropriating. So, it's a question of balancing with that perception and having the freedom to do what you want.
Bruce, there are procedures, though, that if we discovered halfway through the year that there was some major need, say some catastrophic failure in the water system, we could appropriate the money, but we have to go through a few hoops to get there, and it's better to do it right the first time. Yes, Mike?
Just a technical note. if we were to build a playground next to Village Hall, that fund would come out of the capital fund, not the
Right.
general fund. So the transfers out would clearly take care of that.
But don't you have to have, I mean, if you transfer $100,000 out of the capital fund, I mean, the general fund to the capital fund, don't you have to have $100,000 in the general fund to do that? So.
Well, we do, because we have a fund balance in the general fund, so we're not limited to being able to appropriate from the general fund based on just the tax collections. We can look to all of the,
Appropriations can be money you have on hand, tax revenue coming in, or borrowing. You just have to show the source of the money, basically. That's why when I first came on the board, Mr. Haber, when he was on the board many years ago as well, we had appropriations that were very close to everything we had. And I think this is a much better way to do it. We're a little closer to what we're really thinking, and then giving ourselves some reasonable leeway. So
The first year I was on the board is $14 million.
Right.
was Appropriation. So
We weren't-
I'm
we
not
didn't-
saying we should do that.
we didn't have the tools to be as close to the budget as we are now.
right. And that's the point. We didn't have the budget, and the
But-
budget is letting us do a much better job.
Even so, I mean, I think I used to routinely throw in 3 or 4 million for land acquisition, which is, what the transfers out is now. And even that number may be insufficient. So that's something to look at.
But it's also, again, something to think about. Don't just willy-nilly up it, though, because if it's an emergency, there would be ways to appropriate money later. It just takes more votes and is a bit harder. Okay, any other questions then about the appropriation ordinance? Right then, moving on, statement of economic interest. I believe all of you should have just received from the county an email advising you to fill out your statement of economic interest. If you did not, then please contact me, Trustee Chamberlain. I can imagine why you might not have gotten one. I don't think you have to submit it before the election. So, but those of you who will remain in government office, if you did not receive one, please contact me and I'll get you to the appropriate location at the county. Then finally, over the weekend, we had a water backup, apparently from an ice dam, over the door in the lunchroom. And it hasn't done it over the last few years. We will be checking to make sure that that it's a hopefully one-time occurrence, make sure that the water shield was installed to contract, etc. But we've had a lot of people around the village who have had problems with that. I think all of us probably had icicles on our houses in places where we weren't expecting them. But since it's a 3.5 or so year old building, I really don't like having water leaks in it yet, so we will be double checking that. Does anyone else have any questions? Yes, Chris, are you trying to chirp in?
Oh, no.
Okay. Okay, then, Chief, do we have any visitors wishing to address the board? No one has sent emails in. Moving on then to approval of bills. Do I have a motion for approval of bills?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion or corrections? All right, then, we'll have, may I please have a roll call for approval of bills?
Trustee Chamberlain,
Aye.
Trustee Clayton,
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein, Trustee Haber,
Aye.
Trustee Hollander,
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Moving on to action items under new business. First item A, an ordinance authorizing the sale of surplus personal property owned by the Village of Riverwoods. I think you're all aware that as long as equipment has become surplus or obsolescent, but still has a value of, I think it's over $1,000, we are required to have an ordinance to authorize the sale of that equipment.
So moved.
Okay, we need waiver of first reading. So that's what you were moving, Mr. Haber?
Moved to waive the
Second.
first reading.
And second by Mr. Clayton. Any further discussion? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Chamberlain,
Aye.
trustee Clayton,
Aye.
trustee Goldstein, trustee Haber,
Aye.
trustee Hollander,
Aye.
trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
All right, and while I appreciate your wanting to move it along, Mike, and I know you know fully well it is, let me at least say enough to get the record clear as to what we're doing. Now I need a motion for second reading adoption of the ordinance that will authorize us to dispose of the excess personal property.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any further discussion on that? Yes,
I
Mr.
just have a
Jameson.
quick question. Oh, the last item on the list says miscellaneous appliance installation and connection and small hand tools. I'm not sure how we're selling.
It's the police department. Who's the police commissioner?
These are items that were found. They were tools. I didn't know how else to describe them, and they were never claimed. We've had them for several years. So I thought as long as we were going to auction, we would clear those out also.
Okay, so they're basically just tools.
Yes.
Would you like to change that to say miscellaneous tools, Rick?
I think you should just say miscellaneous tools because it looks like we're trying to auction off installation of appliances, which I know that's not what we're doing. So I think you should just say,
I will take that as a motion to approve, subject to that amendment. Do I have a second as it's?
sorry.
Actually, Mike, you made it, and Mike, you seconded. Do you both accept that amendment?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, were you the second, Cheryl? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, any other amendments or questions? All right, then we have a roll call to approve the ordinance as amended for the sale of surplus property.
Trustee Chamberlain,
Aye.
trustee Clayton,
Aye.
trustee Goldstein, trustee Haber,
Aye.
trustee Hollander,
Aye.
trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Ordinance 210302.
Okay, thank you. Pardon me. Item B on the agenda is an ordinance on representation of the village on certain intergovernmental bodies. We had brought this up before in general discussion that there's some language that raises some question as to who can be on which boards, et cetera. So council has tried to amend or strike that, create an ordinance that will make clear how we're setting up our representation so that there is not a conflict and that we can continue to be represented. Let me turn it over to council here for further explanation.
Well, that was a great job. Basically, we have intergovernmental agreements. We have boards that are created pursuant to those agreements. And it may be, for example, that in the case of SWACO, where right now they require that the village representative be an elected official, they may be willing to change that. They're very fond of one of the current members on the SWACO board who will no longer be necessarily an elected official. And so I don't know that SWACO will do this, but they would look to us to make sure that we had authority to make the appropriate designation. So I'm sort of encouraging them to think this through. Same issue sort of came up with the NSSRA. Again, we appoint a representative to the board. In that case, it doesn't have to be an elected official and hasn't been for the last period of time. And I wanted to set this up in a way that it was not very formalistic and simply just acknowledge the fact that we have a process for designating representatives to these boards.
Yes, I think SWACO is going to say that anyone who's served over 20 years as an elected official, a former mayor, and been on the SWACO board for at least 20 years would be eligible, but it's not specific or legislation. We set this up for first reading because it's not urgent. It's up to the board whether you want to waive it. First reading and deal with it now. Mr. Haber,
I move that we waive first reading.
Second.
Second.
further discussion?
I'm sorry,
Rick?
we have a question. Sorry, being a pain
Nope,
tonight.
nope.
In item B, under the village representative, I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. It says the village president by and with the advice and consent of the board of trustees. So we're saying that the board has to agree, at least a majority of the board has to agree to the appointee. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yes.
correct.
And I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure that that's what it said. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for waiver of first reading. Any other questions? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Chamberlain,
aye,
trustee Clayton,
Aye.
trustee Goldstein, trustee Haber,
Aye.
trustee Hollander,
Aye.
trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
All right, now do we have a motion for second reading and adoption?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second for second reading and adoption. Is there any further discussion or question? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please.
Trustee Chamberlain,
aye,
trustee Clayton,
Aye.
trustee Goldstein, trustee Haber,
Aye.
trustee Hollander,
Aye.
trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Ordinance 210303.
All right, thank you. Item C is approval.
Can we
of-
just make a note that there's a typographical error on the ordinance?
Oh, okay.
Village representative is spelled wrong.
Where,
It says,
There's an S
One-
missing.
oh, okay. In 154, the caption,
yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
yes, thank you.
at least it doesn't say reprehensible, which might be more accurate.
We'll fix that. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, moving on to item C, approval of release and settlement with North Shore Gas Company in relation to our building audit. So far, we have only a draft on that release. Council, I don't let you take it and advise on the status.
I think they saved us $3,700 with this particular audit, and the settlement agreement had, in typical utility fashion, 2 pages of confidentiality provisions. I've always told them, we're happy to sign the settlement agreement, but you can't ask us to violate, Freedom of Information Act. So I sent them some changes, and then it'll take them, several weeks to filter through. So anyway, I don't see anything really much to discuss on the settlement agreement. It's not worth your time, really. I put it on the agenda, and as soon as they've agreed on cleaning up some language, it'll be back to you.
Okay, unless somebody's dying to vote on it tonight, but we'll hold that over until we get a final language. Item D then, under old business, we finally have back consideration and possible approval of the engineer's recommendations for upgrade of automatic meter reading AMR system. Mr. Engineer.
So, hopefully everybody's had a chance to review the revised recommendation. When I brought this recommendation back in September, I think it was, the fundamentals haven't changed. Midwest Meter informed us that they are going to stop supporting the radio RF setup that we currently have for our meter reading system, and Badger Meter, the supplier, is migrating to a cellular system, and their quote hasn't changed since my initial recommendation, nor has the cost of the installs. At the direction of the board, we did solicit a quote from really the only competitor that Midwest Meter has, or Badger Meter has in the region, which is Census, and through their vendor Core and Main. And not surprisingly, the Core and Main Census proposal is significantly more, and that's largely driven by the fact that they would have to replace all the meter bases that we currently have to make them operable with the Census endpoints that would broadcast the reads back to the village, as well as install their own RF gateway receiving antenna on the Ravinia Green water tower. So, again, not surprising that they can't compete on cost with the Midwest Meter, Badger Meter proposal. A couple of other things have evolved since I brought the initial recommendation to the village, and they're items that I suggest the village look to address, assuming that the board approves moving forward with this meter reading upgrade, it creates a rare opportunity for us where we're actually going to have human beings in every building that has a water account. And it is an opportunity to do some inspections and inventories that basically are required by EPA at this point. And it's going to save us a lot of legwork and heartburn really for to collect this information through surveys and the like. And so I'm suggesting that we take advantage of this opportunity and have the meter endpoint installing firm collect this inventory data for us as well, which right now we really don't have a good handle on the sizes of the meters we have in each house, the serial numbers of those meters, of course, the service line material. Again, there's not a high probability that we have lead services in Riverwoods, but there could be some. And since we're going to be in the house, we should inventory that as well. And then the really, I guess, the EPA requires every 3 years that the village do a backflow across connection survey. And so through Backflow Solutions Inc., BSI, we sent out a survey form to all of our water customers, and I attached the summary of the results to our recommendation. And there, of course, we got very low response rate. And from the low response rate we got, they identified a number of potential cross-connection hazards without the proper backflow prevention devices in place. So again, because we, under this proposal, will be in every house, the subcontractor HBK has offered to also query each individual directly while they're at the home. We should be able to get a much more robust response rate, as well as eyes on what some folks have in their plumbing system to identify some of these hazards, which will then lead to another follow-up effort to then enforce the ordinances, the plumbing code essentially, that says if you have these potential hazards, you need to have the proper backflow prevention device and you need to have it tested. So it's kind of fortuitous timing for us. I think, again, if the board chooses to move forward with the AMR upgrade, that we can do all this inspection and indexing while we're in the homes. I summarized at the end the total costs involved. I tried to include some contingencies. We know, like anything else, 5% of the effort winds up being 20% of the total. We're going to have a handful of homes where we have difficulty getting in or making the appointment, or discover oddities. So I tried to put some contingency in that. I tried to account for time that my office will spend coordinating this effort. And then, as Trustee Clayton mentioned, this cost, the exact number there is, and Trustee Clayton, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's 356,000 or thereabout in the 2021 water expenditures specifically to cover this item. So this is not a new item that's coming up against the budget.
That's correct.
So in summary, our recommendation is for the board to authorize and budget up to $345,000 for the automatic meter reading equipment upgrade, as well as the ancillary inspection and inventory items.
You're muted, John.
Sorry, forgot. Trustee Jamerson.
I just want to say that I got one of those letters and I did fill it out after I had a backflow preventer put in because I have a boiler that when I was on a well, you know, it was the Wild West out here. And I think that as people move from wells to municipal water now and in the future, we're going to find more and more of these situations where people have irrigation systems or boilers for radiant heat that are, you know, were connected before that they didn't even know that they needed to be separated from their personal water supply. And now that they're on the municipal water, I think it's, you know, it's obviously a big deal. So
You can see that I'm not at all sure we got a large percentage of the lawn irrigation systems. I think there may be more than that just in Thorngate, let alone around the village. Well, we think that it's about 100% in Thorngate, quite frankly. So 220 is a little low. So we clearly need to get that collected back. And yes, I've got the same letter that Pat's referring to where the IEPA is becoming much more concerned about the lead and copper in the pipes and is making everybody else go check for it. So other questions from the board? Yes, Cheryl? Are you trying to blot us out or are you wanting to be seen?
I wasn't sure where my hand was going to show up. Pat, maybe you can help me understand how this works. So I understand that the new updated way of doing this is through cell service. I think we all know how well our mobile phones work in the village of Riverwoods and the self-service is a problem. And I have heard from other contractors about other equipment that operates on cell service and the trees being a problem. I know that there are additional things that you can do to make sure that it doesn't become a problem. So maybe that's already been anticipated, and how is this going to work?
So the Midwest did what, you know, they said they did their propagation study. They're satisfied that there is sufficient coverage. Now, of course, they want to sell the village $200,000 worth of transmitters. So what we'll do is we'll structure this that we're not buying all $200,000 of these and then we're stuck with them if they're not working. We will send out, we'll do a pilot installation program. We'll send them around to, you know, maybe a dozen or 2 dozen locations spread all over the village. And we'll see those up and running and reporting and connected. Then, you know, if we have a problem with 12 out of 24, then we're going to hold on the remainder of the order.
Okay, great. That's what I was going to suggest, that we do some sort of testing in the areas where we think we are most likely to have a problem.
Yes, Mr. Jamerson.
If I can comment on the cell service, cellular, just as an aside, cellular telephone calls take up much more bandwidth than a text message. So if you don't have a good cell signal, you can still send and receive text messages all day long. So my guess is that they're not using the bandwidth that you would use for a call, probably using the bandwidth because they're just sending a data point. So they don't need quite as robust of a cellular network. Plus, they're starting to put 5G antennas all over the place, and we're not going to be far behind that when that happens. So I'm not as concerned, but I agree we should roll it out slowly.
Are there any other comments or questions from the board? All right, then I would ask for a motion to approve a contract with Midwest and HBK water meter service in an amount not to exceed $345,000 for the upgrade of the automated meter reading system and performance of the service material, inventory, and cross-connection inspections.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, then further discussion. Hearing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Chamberlain,
Aye.
trustee Clayton,
Aye.
trustee Goldstein, trustee Haber,
Aye.
trustee Hollander,
Aye.
trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Thank you. That ends the business on the agenda. Standing committee reports, trustee Haber.
I don't have anything to report.
All right. Trustee Chamberlain.
No updates.
Well, we double checked because you normally are very prompt at giving us the cost share, but Steve
Yes.
couldn't get out through the snow, so nobody got out there.
That is exactly why there are no updates.
So understood. Trustee Jamerson.
The building report is in the packet. No surprise, we're down again from year to year on permits, mainly because we had a pretty robust first quarter with a commercial last year. And so we're down, not surprising. I would like to just say, because the question has come up a couple times, our electric aggregation program is coming to an end in August. That's when it's renewed. I've had several residents contact me, and I think one contacted John recently about community solar. The little bit of research that I've done, Deerfield and the consortium that they were in with Deerfield and Highland Park and Northbrook and a couple of other towns, I think there were 9 of them all together, when they did the original electric aggregation. That consortium has already connected with a community solar project that was built in Elgin, has been finished in Elgin, and they are actually receiving or close to receiving solar electricity with the people in those communities. Unfortunately, the Elgin project is about the only one that's up and operating right now. So there is the limited research, and I'll say limited research that I've done, shows that right now there are not any large scale community solar places that are accepting municipalities as a whole. But I will keep looking at that because I know it's on a lot of our residents' radars right now. It's not saying that people can't connect to a community solar project on their own. And I can't tell you what the savings would or would not be for that. They'd have to do their own research on that. But we will probably go and get an electric aggregation quote again. I don't know what's going to happen with it, whether it's going to be beneficial to the residents or not. The village power consumption for our pumping stations, the lift stations, is also up in August, and we will be going out for quotes on that as well. So it's in process.
And just as an aside to that, our last contracts have all had the ability to have some degree, I believe even 100% for residents from renewable sources.
Yes.
So that option has always been available to residents.
Yes, it is. And it is available, but it's also more expensive than
Right.
the non-renewable energy. And I
It
think,
is, but it's not that much more expensive because I'm on it.
no, it's not. But I think the community solar actually, people are getting credits on their, not credits,
Mhm.
but they're getting rates that are below the standard rate. So
Rick, can you maybe put a short blurb in the Village Voice before August to let the community know what's happening with this program? I've also gotten a couple calls, and maybe whenever we resolve it, might be nice to let the community know, because we did have a good response initially.
sure, I can do that. I'll have to find out when I think the Village Voice deadline just passed. If I,
There's another one out there right now. So Rick,
okay.
if you're able to get it done, go ahead.
I'll see
Somebody
how-
I know can kind of slow the process as necessary.
Okay. All right, we'll do.
So, yeah, we can send out an email blast with that too. And I think that would be a good topic to get out to people. Okay, trustee Goldstein did not relay anything that he wished to have passed on. Trustee Hollander.
There's been a recent interest in annexation, voluntary or otherwise. I've spent some time along with Chris Ford and Mike Clayton. And we're looking at, we looked at 3 areas for voluntary annexation. One was the sales barn, and have had a couple phone calls with people involved with that. My guess is that if and when the sales barn is sold, they will probably annex to Riverwoods. We're looking at potentially doing a voluntary annexation prior to that time, but I think the chances are less than 25% that that's going to come to fruition. The second area was asking whether or not the Flanagans wanted to have the 37 acres annexed before the sale was occurred. As expected, that was not received with excitement, but they did indicate that there was a good chance that this was going to be resolved within the next 4 to 6 weeks, one way or the other. And the third item was the possibility of taking another run at the mulch center that's been looked at a few times in the past. As soon as we get some more information on that, we're going to proceed. I don't think any of this is going to come to fruition, but I think it's worthwhile periodically to take another look at it. If anybody has any questions on it, I'll try to answer them.
Any questions for Henry on that point? Thank you. Trustee Clayton?
Oh, Henry, excuse me, covered everything really well. I would just add one point, and that is, it's clear when you look at the maps that the annexing the 37 acres is really a key point, because it gives us access to the speedway across the street and some other opportunities. So that's an important thing to do if we have the opportunity to do it.
Okay. I know of no reason to go into executive session. Does anyone have anything for the good of the order? Hearing nothing, the next meeting is scheduled for March 16th, 2021 at 7:30. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those, sorry, roll call.
Trustee Chamberlain,
Aye.
trustee Clayton,
Aye.
trustee Goldstein, trustee Haber,
Aye.
trustee Hollander,
Bye.
trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.